in here.
Word.
Let's talk about uh the I think this is the biggest news story going on right now. I'm always a little disconnected from like what mainstream news is talking about, but it feels like the biggest news story right now is what's going on at Columbia and other college campuses across the country. For those unaware, there have been sweeping protests, and this really the epicenter of this started at Columbia, where many student organizations came together to take over one of the grassy areas on Columbia's campus and set up an encampment. And they have been constantly there, living there in tents ever since. And they have some pretty simple demands. They want their university, which they intend to pay money to divest its investments from Israel and Israeli companies. And they also want them to be transparent about where their money is being invested, which seems like pretty reasonable demands. If I'm giving you money, I'd like to know what you're doing with it. However, Columbia and of course every other university that is being subject to these protests right now aren't budging because they don't want to do that for reasons that I think should be obvious to everyone. And it's gotten to the point where I think that this situation could end with something really bad and big happening, because it really seems like a unstoppable or really an unmovable object meets unmovable object scenario. Because on one end, you have college students who are really, really, really pissed off and have nothing to lose. And I don't know if you've ever met pissed off college students with nothing to lose, but they are not an easily movable group of people because there's nothing you can threaten them with. And then on the other hand, you have universities who have billions of dollars in donations coming from, especially in Columbia's instance, very, very wealthy, very, very pro-Israel people. When these protests have come to a head in the past around the Vietnam War, around South African apartheid, that's the factor that was missing. That like, yeah, the institutions didn't want to give in to the protesters, but it's not like they had their massive mega donors being like, we're definitely going to pull the plug on all of our funding if you give in to these students, in the same way that they're going to do now. And so in those situations in the past, we have had armed military force come into campus and literally murder students. It happened at Kent State back in 1970. And I honestly don't see that ending really any other way here. Like, I don't know if anyone dies, but I don't see this ending without massive government force used against peaceful protesters on college campuses. I could be wrong, but it does seem like we're about to be taking a lot of pictures that are going to be in history books for a long time to come. What do you guys think? You guys are not too far removed from college, correct?
Yeah.
Or you're
1 year.
1 year removed from college, so you might be a little bit more in the know than I am. But what have your guys' thoughts been on this situation as it has unfolded?
Go ahead, Gage. You got it.
Well, I mean, thoughts on the general situation. It's like, yeah, talk your shit. You know what I'm saying? But just speaking to what you're saying about how this could end badly, I think we're already kind of starting to see things escalate. Specifically, I don't quote me on this. I was trying to catch up. Like, work's been crazy. You know what I mean? I was trying to catch up before I hopped on. I think it's at UT Austin. Police are already there, and I don't want to say brutalizing protesters, but they're arresting protesters. I've seen videos of them tasing protesters on the ground that are already restrained. They're walking through campus armed. I don't know if the National Guard is there, but I've heard there have been talks. There's also an element of it's hard to separate what's going on with people in right-wing media who want to kind of stir the pot and what's actually happening on the ground, because I am disconnected in space and time from what's going on. But things are already starting to look pretty bad. Like, Greg Abbott has already he's already come and made statements saying that he wants all of these protesters arrested and anyone engaging in these needs to be expelled from Texas schools, which is kind of insane for practicing your First Amendment right, when Greg Abbott himself is a guy who signed a bill saying that your First Amendment rights, no matter what party you're on, need to be protected on college campuses specifically. So what's going on there is kind of it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, there's a sort of extreme hypocrisy right now. There's it's like a moral panic happening for conservatives and some liberals as well. And they're the same crowd that's always talking about the First Amendment. We need to protect free speech, whether it's online or on college campuses, specifically for conservatives. But suddenly when left-wing movements and protesters and students go out and exercise the First Amendment right, there's this major issue and they need to be arrested so that they can be stopped. And the one thing that I thought was pretty apparent when I was looking at all of this news is that a lot of political commentators, certainly on the right, like to paint universities as these sort of centers of liberal indoctrination. But when you take a look at what's happening at Columbia, or I think Yale is another one, UT Austin, you can pretty clearly see that that is obviously fake, right? Like these universities are ran in incredibly rigid ways with rigid hierarchies that are pretty strictly enforced. Usually when students are making noise, they can just be ignored. But when you're doing encampments on your college campus, and these encampments are spreading throughout the nation and at different schools, in different states, suddenly you can't really ignore them anymore. And when they're demanding that you divest from interests that you don't want to divest from, or you divest from, like, I don't know, stock portfolios that give money to Raytheon or whatever, that's something you can't really ignore. And I think a lot of this stems from universities fundamentally being ran for revenue. These aren't institutions that are really public utilities as they maybe used to be or as they could be, but now they're ran to make money. And if you want to make money, you got to keep people in their spot, which means maintaining the status quo and ensuring nobody steps out of line. And when students do step out of line and threaten your pocketbooks, you call the police on them to get them to stop. And the last thing I'll say is that there's been a lot of accusations of anti-Semitism. Sort of all of these encampments have been painted with the broad brush of this is anti-Semitic. And I'm sure there are people that are saying, like, we are literally Hamas. Like, you could probably find a few people that are saying that kind of thing. But I want to note that in previous movements, say the civil rights movement, for example, I'm sure you could have found someone that was like, I irrationally hate all white people because they're white. But that doesn't mean that the aims of the broader movement are suddenly invalid. I think people are blasting these claims of anti-Semitism way out of proportion, but that's kind of to be expected when it's a pro-Palestine movement. So,
yeah. I knew that a lot of my points would be taken by you guys, not because I'm hacky and lazy, but you guys are smart, and so I knew you guys. So I want to kind of hit the notes of that. We're bearing the lead here. That Gage says he's disconnected from time and space. He's literally a fourth dimensional being. That's good to know. I don't not get on his bad side. That's important information. Remember that before we schedule, folks. But I want to reiterate something Jeremy said, talking about how we live in this society that fetishizes. Well, we pretend to fetishize the First Amendment and free speech and protest. We always talk about how great it is. Like, we grow up being told how awesome something like the Boston Tea Party was, but you do 10 cents worth of damage. Now you're a terrorist. Now oh my God, like, what is wrong with you? How dare you block a road or something? It's like, okay, are we for this protest stuff or not? And once again, the protest, like, the reason for the protest matters. Like, if you're protesting something stupid, yeah, I'm gonna be upset if you you damage property and shit like that. But if you're protesting what's happening now in Gaza, I don't know how you could shit on someone for that, or how you could be annoyed and upset by it. And one thing you guys didn't say that John might say, so I say it real quick before he says it, is that so their protest, specifically the one in Colombia we're talking about, was they want to divest from Zionist friendly organizations, stuff like that. And everyone acts like that's unreasonable when we literally have, I checked right before the show, 38 states with anti-BDS laws. There are 30, like the vast majority of the 50 states, it is illegal for you to, or you cannot work for the state if you advocate in anti-BDS or boycott, divestiture, and sanctions. If you advocate for BDS. And that's a First Amendment violation I've ever seen one, and no one seems to give a fuck. Like, nobody. And even like a college kid just saying, "Hey, how about my school that I go to, that I pay tuition to? How about they do what I want with that money?" Nope. And then, what you mentioned, I was going to mention too about in Texas, how they got the fucking cops there. They are brutalizing people. I saw one cop like body slam like this cameraman or something like that. It's insanity. And I think you're right, John, that this is not something that's going to play over well with the people. Like even if they haven't been paying attention by now, they're still like Kent State was like what 55 years ago almost. It's still pretty powerful. It's like, oh yeah, they fucking shot kids protesting the Vietnam War. Those kids were right. And I don't know if you guys have seen the post I've seen. Is like, hey, if you're on the side like in history that's telling people protesting for peace in college they're wrong, you're usually not on the correct side of history. So I think that it's bending more toward our direction. It's taking too long, but we are getting there.
Well, that's the thing. It's just like this particular story. There's so much in the entire saga that has happened. And I mean, since October 7th and well before then as well, that should piss anyone off who has any, non-broken moral compass. But like, this is just a cacophony of things that piss me off. Because not only is that, all of the things that piss me off about Israel Gaza, that like people don't understand what's going on, that like people pretend that this is some complicated moral question when it is not, that also on top of that, you're having this clear and obvious First Amendment issue where you would really goddamn hope that the average American would be like, okay, there's protests going on. And at least back in the day, the Vietnam War protests, they at least had the fucking decency to like lie about the fact that these protests were violent and hurting people. Now they're just lying about the fact that they're anti-Semitic. And like, don't get me wrong, anti-Semitism is very bad and like shouldn't happen. But like, it's protected fucking First Amendment speech. Like, yeah, you can say to people who are like, oh, I am Hamas. There's definitely some of them, but that's still protected First Amendment fucking speech. I don't understand the moral difference between saying I am Hamas and saying I am pro-Israeli. In fact, I actually do, because Israel has killed tens of thousands more people than Hamas. It is way more morally justifiable to be pro-Hamas than pro-Israel, but we're acting like some random college students who are on the tangents of this protest saying something that is pro-Hamas is somehow justifies bringing police officers with guns onto the campus to remove them by force. It makes utterly no sense. It's as if I'm hearing like when you're a kid and you're hearing adults speak about things you don't quite understand, and they kind of go against everything you understand about morality, but they like, for whatever reason, they're saying this thing is okay because they're lying to you. Like that's how this feels. It feels like the kids are the adults in the room and all of the adults are pretending like they aren't. And it really pisses me off.
It's like also, I think with the issue of how colleges are responding to this, when we look at statements from these like university presidents or people like Greg Abbott, a lot of how these protests have been framed are as disruptions. And a lot of the places these protests are happening at are public universities. And so they are obligated by nature to have to uphold your first, second, third, fourth, all of your amendment rights, right? They're extensions of the government, kind of based on the funding that they receive, based on their status as public institutions. And they are framing their kind of protest busting as being, you have a right to protest. You've heard this from many university presidents, and Greg Abbott, I think, while you have a right to protest, you do not have the right to disrupt other people in their daily activities, which is bullshit.
Which is what a protest fucking is. Like, that's what it is.
Exactly. You can't protest for anything if you cannot disrupt anything in any way, shape, or form.
Same fucking argument was made against MLK, guys, and it was wrong then and it's wrong now.
I've seen so many arguments talking about how, oh, well, they're stopping kids from getting to classes because people put tents on an area.
Yeah, they're not.
Fucking city block, maybe size area of grass. Oh no, you have to walk around it. I was in college a year ago. I literally know. Like, when pro or anti-abortion protesters would come pull up to football games and take over a sidewalk with literal fake pictures of like dead babies and shove them in my face, I just walked around them. Nobody said that was disruptive. No, even though that was visceral.
Yeah, at my university, I remember my freshman year brought out like this outdoor TV screen that was like massive, the size of like a projector, and it was just pictures, B-roll basically, of fetuses being cut in half because they wanted to talk to kids about how bad abortion was. But nobody cares when that kind of thing happens. I mean, I say like they're dumb for being on campus, but I'm not going to take away the right to do it. And the thing that gets me about Columbia is Columbia University is mocked by the people that go there as the protest school. It has a history of having student protests at it. And the administrators know this. They sort of use this as a kind of piece of pride to say like, oh yeah, we encourage student activism, we encourage student leadership. But suddenly when the students do leadership, when they are active in their community and making demands, suddenly it's a bad thing. It's all fake and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, you guys are talking about protests that happened when you were in school. I remember back when I was in college, we had a lot of people protesting the telegraph and the horseless carriage. You know, they didn't think that it would help the economy all that much. They were worried. But what you remind me of is John, when you talked about how saying I am pro-Hamas is protected for free speech. It is true. It reminded me of a debate between William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal, and it was during the Vietnam War. And there were these people who were protesting the Vietnam War who tore down an American flag from the town square, and they instead put up a flag of for the Viet Cong. And then cops came and beat the shit out of him. And he's like, doesn't it seem like an act of aggression? He goes, why is it an act of aggression to fly their flag? Like, why? He's like, well, what does it matter? Like that's their free speech. If they support them, then they can do it. And it's like, yeah, it's true. And I hadn't thought about it the way. It's pretty good. But I know John doesn't have a lot of time here, but I had a surprise. Oh, I'm sorry, John. I'm going to add more onto that before I do that.
I just wanted to say, and I'm looking for this on the site, so I can't confirm whether or not this is live on the Columbia website right now. But it was live on the Columbia website. And it is, hold on. This is a statement that was on the Columbia website regarding how I'll just read it. Columbia is a far different place today than it was in the spring of 1968 when protesters took over university buildings amid discontent about the Vietnam War, racism, and the university's proposed expansion into Morningside Park. After a week-long standoff, New York City police stormed the campus and arrested more than 700 people. The fallout dogged Columbia for years. It took decades for the university to recover from these turbulent times. Columbia has now one of the most socioeconomically diverse student bodies among its peer institutions. It's at a new campus designed to open the community and pursue fields of inquiry, blah, 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 blah. Point is, they fucking lie all the time about this bullshit that we are different now. No, you're fucking not. You are still siding with your fucking donors because that's where you're making your fucking millions. And that's it. That's the story. That was the story in Vietnam. It's the story now. Every time these fucking institutions put a fucking rainbow flag up, it's just a goddamn lie. They don't give a shit.
It's camouflage.
It's fucking camouflage. And it should piss everyone off. It should piss conservatives. It should piss conservatives off fucking more. You know, we're talking about small. Well, yeah, but ideologically, we want to talk about small government. We want to talk about securing our freedoms. This is it, people. This is people using their fucking freedom, their right to protest. If there were actually fucking assaults and harassment going on, we would see police reports about them. They would be happening. They would be reported, but they're not because it's all fucking made up. And even if it wasn't made up, it still wouldn't be a reason to shut down the protest. I'm fucking living in fucking Candyland, Fantasyland. Thank you, Fractal. Hell yeah to you. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching this show today. Depending on which show you watch from this week, you either just watched a video of us complimenting Joe Biden or absolutely shitting on him, or maybe us shitting on the Republicans. So it was a wide array of what we got to shit on this week.
And of course, we go after Republicans too, because they're pretty bad. But got to shit on Joe Biden every once in a while. He's the guy in power after all. So
and Jeremy, if people want to hear you shit on Joe Biden some more, where can they find you?
Head in the Office podcast, or just Head in the Office, available on all platforms.
What is that? What's up? I'm Gage. I'm also with Head in the Office.
I swear we're professionals here, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning into the show. We really appreciate you guys. If you're curious about my favorite thing to shit on, that would be Tucker Carlson's mom. It's made even more fun to do it because she's dead. So please join into the show next time. We really appreciate it. Thanks.